I'm gonna do my own thing.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and there is a staggering amount of Easter eggs in Spider-Man across the Spider-Verse. Every single frame is packed with references to the movies and comics, and we are here to break all of them down for you. All right, let's do this. The Easter eggs start in the title sequence with the Marvel logo glitching to become multiple Marvel logos, symbolizing the multiple Marvel universes that we see in this movie. And for a moment, the Sony logo glitches into the title font from the Miles Morales comic book. And just like the last movie, this one begins with the assurance that it has been approved by the Comics Code Authority. Now, this was an organization that for decades certified that comic books were safe for your children to read.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
And by the way, everyone, I just want to say thanks for watching. And if you want to keep supporting our channel, we have a merch store where you can get this amazing Doug as Spider-Man meme shirt and many, many more. Plus, we're always making original content on TikTok and other socials that you can't find on YouTube. And we have a podcast that's on like all the things. Please follow. Thanks again. Back to the video. A few more Easter eggs in the title. Sony also glitches to the Spider-Gwen font. The Columbia logo becomes a negative image like the Spdier-Verse. Sony animation logo becomes the same font as the 1960 Spider-Man cartoon. And my favorite, this logo replicates the cover of Amazing Spider-Man 300, the first full appearance of Venom. The first movie began with narration from Peter Parker, but this one begins with Gwen stating, "Let's do things differently." This is a cool way to let us know that the last movie was initially presented from the point of view of Peter Parker, the Spider-Man that we were all familiar with, but this one will be from the point of view of Gwen and Miles. Now, this opening is a lot like Spider-Man 2, which began with a visual recap of events from the first movie, painted by artist Alex Ross. She speed runs through the events of the first movie, especially highlighting the spider that bit Miles being number 42, just like it is in the comic book. Now, in the books, this was a reference to Jackie Robinson, the first black player in baseball, because Miles was the first black Spider-Man. She also mentions that Aunt May moved to Florida, just like in the Ultimate Universe. After the death of Peter Parker, May and Gwen briefly moved to France. Now, during this flashback, Gwen is drumming while Mary Jane sings "Not the Only One" over and over, which contrasts the repetition of this narration in the first movie.
I've been the one and only Spider-Man.
I thought I was the one and only Spider-Man.
I've been the one and only Spider-Woman.
I loved this watercolor design of Gwen's universe. The look seems modeled off of the beautiful covers drawn by her co-creator, Robbie Rodriguez. The opening is also very loyal to Rodriguez and co-creator Jason Latour's comic. Spider-Gwen's first appearance in Into the Spider-Verse issue 2 opens with her playing in her friend's band, the Mary Janes, just like in this movie, and then quickly recaps Peter's death as the Lizard, where he has the exact same last words, "I want it to be special like you." We also see that she goes to her universe's version of the Brooklyn Visions Academy, the same school that Miles attends. Just like in the comics, Peter is her best friend, and in the movie, he is bullied by somebody named Ned.
Ned, but that's Peter's best friend.
Well, that's his best friend in the MCU movies, but in the comics, Ned Leeds was a reporter rival of Peter's, who at one point was revealed to be the villain Hobgoblin. Man, I love Spider-Verse so much. It does a great job of capturing the dramatic weight of this comic book movie renaissance, but it also balances that out by just being fun. The animation is so groundbreaking and colorful, it's just the kind of movie that makes you feel like you're a kid again, watching Saturday morning cartoons and eating cereal.
Is that why you're eating cereal during this video? You shouldn't be eating junk food cereal like that.
Oh, Doug, this isn't junk food, it's Magic Spoon, the same cereal that Star-Lord was eating in Guardians 3. Magic Spoon tastes like all the cereals from my childhood, but it has no gluten, soy, and there are 0 grams of sugar. But most importantly, it tastes so good. You can build your very own variety box from cocoa, fruity, which is what this is, frosted, peanut butter, cookies and cream, and maple waffle flavors, plus other awesome flavors including honey nut, blueberry muffin, cinnamon roll, and birthday cake. Magic Spoon is always launching limited edition flavors, and this month they have brought us oatmeal cookies and chocolate chip cookies, just like my favorite cereal when I was a kid. Now look, I'm not kidding when I say how high quality this is. 0 grams of sugar, 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving, plus only 140 calories, and it's high in protein. But most importantly, it's just fun. Like, we may be grown-ups, but like, live the grown-up life you always wanted to live. Eat fun cereals and watch cartoons. Oh man. Like, I'm not gonna go back to eating regular cereal, and Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if it's not for you, they'll refund your money and you can part ways as friends. So thanks again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. Click out the link below or scan the QR code on the screen and use the code ScreenCrush for $5 off your variety pack, or go to magicspoon.com/ScreenCrush today. And don't forget to add the limited edition oatmeal cookie and chocolate chip cookie to your order. Now back to the Easter eggs. Just like in the comic, Gwen's dad is dead set on hunting down Spider-Woman for the death of Peter Parker. And you'll remember that Dennis Leary's version of Captain Stacy was the same in The Amazing Spider-Man.
Okay, I wear a badge.
This guy wears a mask like a, like an outlaw.
He blames her for Peter's death because he saw Spider-Woman leaving his body behind, very similar to how initially Miles' dad blamed him for the death of his brother Aaron.
I want an APB on a new Spider-Man.
Then Jonah Jameson goes on a rant about the death of Peter Parker, and I loved, like in every reality, he is always played by J.K. Simmons. More on him in just a bit. I was so impressed with how the animators are able to create a totally different look and feel for each universe. Miles' universe is more comic booky and filled with Ben-Day dots. Mumbattan is more like a Bollywood poster brought to life, while Gwen's world is filled with these bright pastel watercolors that are affected by her mood. Notice how the world lights up as soon as she hugs her father. And there's other cool comic book details, like how she sees her reflection in the glass as she's Spider-Woman, a neat way that the comic would use to show a hero's multiple identities. And then the Vulture attacks the Guggenheim Art Museum. So this variant of Vulture is from a Renaissance era Da Vinci dimension, so he looks like he's drawn on like sepia parchment. A Renaissance era villain was a perfect choice because he has very particular ideas about what art is. You know, like they should be like Renaissance paintings. But the Guggenheim often showcases more avant-garde art. For instance, he cuts a Jeff Koons balloon dog's head off and lots of like mini dogs spill out. My favorite line of the entire movie is when he says, "You call this art?" And Gwen answers, "Well, we're talking about it, aren't we?"
Because the goal of any artist is to engage with their societal norms.
Hey, that's right, high five. And by the way, when Captain Stacy reads the file for this universe's Vulture, it says that his occupation was a middle school secretary. And then, Spider-Man 2099 shows up. Sort of appropriate because the Vulture is one of the very first villains that he ever faced in his own comic book.
Well, who is Spider-Man 2099?
He is one of my all-time favorite Spider-Men from the comics. He first appeared in a 1992 comic book created by Peter David and Rick Leonardi. He was the first hero in a line of reboots that set the Marvel Universe in like a cyberpunk future years after heroes disappeared from Earth. It's like Batman Beyond, but Spider-Man 2099 did it first. Spider-Man was the flagship character of this 2099 comics line, a mixed bag that included a great run of Doom 2099 by Warren Ellis, where Doom actually does conquer the entire world. So this version of Spider-Man was always edgier. He lived in a dystopian future controlled by evil corporations. And my only gripe with this movie is that this version of Spider-Man 2099 lives in a society if meme and not in a hellscape ruled by Alchemax. He immediately uses the word shock as a curse word just like he does in the comics. Now his real name is Miguel O'Hare, and he's always had a harder edge than Peter Parker. Like Miles, he has a mixed ancestry with a Mexican mother and an Irish father, kind of. Long story. He doesn't really like people, and for dozens of issues of the comics, he doesn't really care about making the world a better place. In the comics, his boss gets him addicted to a drug, so Miguel experiments on himself to remove the addiction. Then he accidentally becomes a human spider with big talons, fangs, and organic webbing. I think the first Spider-Man with organic webbing, actually. Now, at first, he just wants to live a normal life, get rid of his condition, but over the years, he turns into a rebel against corporations and fights to bring Alchemax down. It is a great comic that I highly recommend, and the movie even features the cover of the very first issue. But Miguel cuts off his own origin story in the movie because he is all business. He's wearing a wrist device that navigates the multiverse, much like the time-space GPS that Tony invented in Avengers Endgame. When he shows up, Gwen calls him Blue Panther, a play on Black Panther, Nacho Libre after the underrated Jack Black film, Caped Blue Satyr, a play on Batman's nickname, and Dark Garfield.
I hate Mondays. Just hate them.
During the fight, he says,
"Don't even get me started on Doctor Strange and the little nerd back on Earth 1999.
So this, of course, references Spider-Man and Doctor Strange toying with the multiverse in Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, why does he call the MCU Earth 1999999? And Christine Palmer said it had a different number.
And we've designated yours 616.
Well, okay, this is a little tricky. So the comic universe, like the main comic universe, is 616, and the MCU was originally designated as 1999999. But Christine has her own naming system that is separate from the good people at Marvel. Does that work?
Yeah, good enough for me, person.
And the reason he hates them is because they risk the lives of the many to save a few villains. Just like Miles is going to place the multiverse at risk in this movie. So this is not just like a random Easter egg. During the fight, Miguel says Vulture has access to hammer space. Now this is a term from anime, whenever a character suddenly draws a large weapon from nowhere. You know, like Spider-Ham did in the last movie. The movie even includes a little editor's note in the corner, just like in the comics, to explain confusing things like this as we go along. And then we get the arrival of the Spider-Woman, played by Issa Rae. Now, there have been several versions of Spider-Woman over the years, but this is Jessica Drew, the original. She first appeared in Marvel Spotlight 32 way back in 1977, and her origins have changed a few times in the comics. And, like all the best stuff from the comics, it gets weird. So, when Jessica Drew was young, her family moved near Mount Wundagore, which is the site of Chthon's temple and Multiverse of Madness. But in the comics, it was the home of the High Evolutionary, the excellent villain from Guardians of the Galaxy 3. It's also where Scarlet Witch and Pietro were born, delivered by a cow midwife. So the proximity to Mount Wundagore's radiation made Jessica sick, so her dad saved her life with a serum filled with spider blood. Hence, she gets spider powers. Then she ends up being raised by the High Evolutionary. Eventually, she becomes a superhero and an agent of Hydra and then an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And this version of Spider-Woman is probably a nod to a comic spin-off of Spider-Man's appearances on The Electric Company, a PBS Kids show from the 1970s. It showed an Electric Company character named Valerie finding the spider suit and becoming a hero. So as soon as Jessica rolls in, Gwen says, "Will you adopt me?" which she kind of does in the movie. After the destruction, a couple patrons in the museum look at the wreckage and say, "I think it's a Banksy," referring to the anonymous underground street artist famous for their protest work. Banksy also got a shout out in Age of Ultron.
And he did a Banksy at the crime scene.
The scene where Captain Stacy is arresting Gwen and unmasking her is also a canon plot point that is lifted from The Amazing Spider-Man. In the original comics, Captain Stacy didn't hunt down Spider-Man, but on his deathbed he did reveal that he knew his true identity when he asked Peter to look out for Gwen. Now I mentioned earlier that the world's colors are influenced by these Spider-Gwen covers, but I also see a lot of artist David Mack in these frames. The moments of intense emotion are when the colors really pop. When Gwen tells her father the truth, the background becomes this oil pastel work, like the formless work of expressionist painters. And then we go to Miles on Earth 1610, which is the number of the Ultimate Universe in the comics.
What's the Ultimate Universe?
Well, the Ultimate Universe was a kind of rebooted Marvel Comics line in the early 2000s with a focus on keeping the heroes as grounded and realistic as possible. In fact, many movie versions of the comics are adapted from the Ultimate line. This was the first time that we saw Nick Fury look like Samuel L. Jackson, and the Ultimate comics also generated the idea of Fury forming the Avengers to stop an alien invasion. In fact, just about all the Phase 1 films were adapted from the Ultimate comics in some way. The font on Earth 1610 is graffiti, a nod to Miles' love of street art. When Miles tells his story, the comic is issue number 2 to indicate that this is the second movie. Every time these movies introduces a new character, they add to the stack of comics, and here we can see a glimpse of Spider-Man 2099, Spider-Gwen, and Spider-Ham. And then we meet the villain, the Spot. So the Spot is like the most unlikely villain we could ever have in this movie, but he's a perfect choice because we will never see him in live action, and his powers translate perfectly to animation. I love that he's drawn as like a blank piece of paper where you can still see the pencil lines that artists would use to render like his base anatomy. In the comics, he was created by Al Milgrom and Herb Trimpe. Now, similar to the movie, he was a scientist working for the Kingpin, and his work backfired and transformed him into a being covered in these dimensional portals. The Spot-verse that we see in the movie is also taken from the comics. So the first time he told Spider-Man his name, Spidey actually laughed at him so hard that he had to rest. And even though he actually beat Spider-Man in their first fight, he's always been a joke villain. He even created a team of other D-list villains called the Legion of Losers. The thing is, though, that even though he's always a joke, the guy does have like an amazing power. He can create these space warping spots. And in the movie, we see him augment that power until he becomes a multiverse level threat. They also did a great job of connecting him to the last film. He's the bagel guy that we see right here. And our old friend Paul at Heavy Spoilers pointed out something that this movie has in common with another great multiverse film, Everything Everywhere All at Once. According to Paul, both of these films hinge on a bagel.
Sucked into a bagel.
When he robs the ATM, notice that there is a different face on the $100 bill because this is a different universe. And there's also a magazine called Place instead of the magazine Time. And small detail, this poster in the bodega calls a soft drink Pop, which I thought they only called it that in Ohio.
No, I don't drink Pop.
The hell's Pop?
Oh, I'm originally from Ohio.
And later on we see a sign that reads soda. It's a generic brand. During his fight with Miles, he gets annoyed and says, don't call it an ATM machine because that's repetitive. And later, Pavitar is annoyed at the redundant terms like chai tea and naan bread. Now I thought this was just a throwaway gag until Miles says that you can have your cake and eat it too if you have 2 cakes. And later he tries to web sling with 2 cakes and ends up ruining both of them, much like Peter ruined the pizzas in Spider-Man 2. So this stuck out to me because Spider-Man, by definition, is a guy who cannot have it all. He is constantly struggling to balance his vigilante life with his normal life. And in this movie, that quest for balance becomes literal, with Miles confronting a dark version of himself at the end of the film. This also ties in nicely with the guidance counselor played by Rachel Dratch. She says that Miles needs a story, something to sell him to college admissions boards. But in a meta way, the movie is about Miles trying to tell his own story and to show the others that he is not confined by fate. Maybe it was an accident that he became Spider-Man, but he can also choose to use that accident to help others. And then Miles' narration takes over the movie, like how multiple Peters Parker switched narration in the first film. But his story is shown through his sketchbook using colored markers. And the best gag from this montage is when he sponsored baby powder called With Great Powder, a play on this.
With great power comes great responsibility.
First page of the notebook has his Great Expectations drawing from the first movie, and his growth spurt is charted alongside his friends from the first film. We also see him fighting minor Spider-Man villains like the Frogman and the Beetle. When he hosts Jeopardy, some of the categories are Kissing in the Rain, a callback to the iconic kiss in Spider-Man 1, Spider Sense and Sensibility, The Wide Web World, and Thwip It. And on the news ticker here, we see that this universe's Flash Thompson was drafted, not by the Army, but by the LA Clippers. But we see that he really just misses his Spider friends, even adding them into the Great Expectations mural from the first movie. Remember, that mural was the spot where he was first bitten by the spider. Miles' roommate is named Genki, and we met him in the first film right here. So in the comics, Genki is the guy in the chair. He actually makes Miles' web fluid for him. But in this movie, he directly avoids helping, saying that it's a slippery slope and he's not his guy in the chair. So of course, this is a direct reference to Ned's role in Homecoming.
Can I be your guy in the chair?
So Ned is basically a reinvention of Genki, with both characters being master builders with Legos, especially building Lego Death Stars. Also, Genki is playing the exceptional Spider-Man PS4 video game. And on the wall here, we see a Daily Bugle newspaper from the Raimi Spider-Man films. Miles' dad gets caught up in the fight with the Spot, and at one point he tries to work up the courage to jump through a portal, but then he chickens out, a callback to this gag in the first movie. They end up in the wreckage of the Collider from the first film and notice that the structure is made from hexagons. So this is awesome for a few reasons. One, hexagons are the building blocks of reality in the MCU. Wanda has reality-shaping powers and her abilities manifest as hexagons. And when ships travel faster than light, they rip holes in space that look like a hexagonal grid. And the multiverse portals in this movie are also hexagons. Spiderwebs are also woven into hexagonal shapes, and later in the movie, we learn about a great web of life and destiny, which is basically the shape of the multiverse. You see, hexagons are the most stable structure in nature. It's why bees use it in their hives, so it all comes down to the bees.
Not the bees!
And if you like that Not the Bees gag, be sure to visit our merch store for our Not the Bees t-shirt, link in the description below. The Spot even runs through his origin, telling Miles that they made each other, which seems like a nod to how Batman and the Joker created one another in Batman 1989.
You made me, remember?
When we see the Spider 42, notice how it's next to a guy who does look like Universe 42 Miles Morales. They have the same hair. So maybe in this universe, this Miles really was supposed to become Spider-Man. After Spot kicks his own butt, Miles and his dad have a heart-to-heart. Well, I guess Spider-Man and Lieutenant Morales have a heart-to-heart. There is a strong theme about Spider people and their father figures in this movie that likely won't be resolved until part 3. Gwen and Miles are both struggling to balance their vigilante lives with their police officer fathers. But the struggle goes both ways, with older Spider-Men struggling to find their footing as parents. Miguel wanted to be a dad so much that he actually inadvertently destroyed a universe. And Peter B is worried that he'll be a good dad to Mayday. He's even reading a book called How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen, How to Listen So Your Kids Will Talk, which is more than a gag. Lack of communication between kids and fathers causes like 90% of the problems in this movie. ScreenCrush editor-in-chief and Spider-Man book author Matt Singer once pointed out to me that after Peter Parker lost his father figure, Uncle Ben, all of the older men in his life are supervillains. So he's somebody who's always struggling to connect with the father figure.
I've been like a father to you. Be a son to me now.
So, with the universe number 42 Miles, we see the darker side of this. When a Spider-Man only has an evil influence around, like Uncle Aaron, he would become a supervillain. Spot also lacks a strong mentor to show him how to use his new power, so he quickly goes out of control, traveling the multiverse like he's America Chavez getting stung by a bee. He visits a Golden Age comics dimension, then a Lego world, which is a fun nod to Phil Lord and Chris Miller's The Lego Movie. This universe also has audio from Jonah in Spider-Man 1, saying,
"Tomorrow morning, Spider-Man, page 1 with a decent picture this time. Move Conway to page 7.
And how awesome was it when he visited Mrs. Chen from the Venom movies? He's very surprised that she's unfazed by him, but remember, she like sees this in her store all the time.
On second thought, please.
Afterwards, we see that Spot has stolen gum called Venomint, a play on Doublemint. And then Spot says the power of the multiverse in the palm of my hand, an obvious nod to this.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Sorry, I meant this.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Then Miles has a montage where he's trying to get to his dad's party while also stopping crime along the way. And we saw Peter have a similar struggle on his way to a date with MJ in Spider-Man 2. He also fights the villain the Armadillo, freaking him into rolling into a frightened ball with one flick. Then Miles arrives late, and the best gag of the entire movie might just be that the icing now spells out, I am not proud. Miles is also wearing a Brooklyn 42 jersey, another nod to Jackie Robinson, who played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He also says, hey, if this isn't nice, what is? Which is one of my my favorite quotes from the author Kurt Vonnegut. When the portal opens in his room, there are a few fun Easter eggs that show that this is a parallel universe. There's these Teriyakimon cards, a spoof of Pokemon. We also see the bus ticket from the day he met Gwen, a Spider-Mobile on the shelf, and this is the car that Peter briefly drove in the comics, a Spider pennant, a PlayStation controller, and a PlayStation 1 poster for a game called Top Skater that looks like the font of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. As I've pointed out before, that game had a code that would unlock Spider-Man as a playable character, and it was so much fun. There's also this Way of the Butterfly poster of Muhammad Ali, calling back to his most famous quote.
Float like a butterfly and sting like a bee.
Also, Gwen has kept her haircut from the first movie, after Miles ripped out part of her hair, probably as a way to remember him. And there's also a copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15, a great read about a bell ringer who died in a fire but was taken to heaven. There's also a superhero story in the beginning of that comic that featured a new character called Spider-Man. There's another comic called True Life Tales of Spider-Man, and this says that it's done by Sanford Green, who drew Miles in the comics and did design work in the first movie. Also, Miles is lying on his bed looking up thinking about Gwen, and then her appearing in his ceiling reminds me an awful lot of the fantasy sequences in the movie American Beauty. When she comes into his room, the first dimension that she mentions is a Shakespearean world, which is awesome because that is actually the first reality that appears in the Spider-Verse comics crossover. Those comics, written by Dan Slott, are so much fun, but they're very different from this film. They're about a family of interdimensional vampires that feast on Spider-Men. They're opposed by a team led by our Peter Parker and a version of Peter Parker where Dr. Octopus took over his body, and they lead hundreds of Spider people. And actually, they headquartered in the future of 2099, just like in this movie. These comics are a great read, and Slott has a lot of fun with all the different Spider dimensions. This movie would not exist without his work. 10 out of 10 must read. Gwen and Miles thread between trucks, much like Peter did at the end of Spider-Man, and they walk around the Williamsburg Bank building, Miles' favorite spot to think. This reminded our editor, Harriet Lengel-Enright, of the Peters talking about their favorite spots to think in No Way Home.
For me, it was the top of the Chrysler Building.
Empire State. It's a better view.
I also love this shot of them hanging upside down to look at the city, a way to visually convey that the two of them have a unique way of viewing the world that nobody else can really share. She tells him how rare they are because they're the Spider people who are not Peter Parker, and in almost every other reality, when Peter falls for Gwen, she falls for him right back. And then Miles spies on Gwen, with the two of them mimicking the classic upside-down spider kiss pose from the first movie. And then we go to my favorite sequence of the movie, Earth 5101, Mumbattan. The Spider-Man from this universe, Pavitar Prabhakar, is also from the comic. There's even a great panel where he gets a pep talk from William Braddock, aka Spider UK. He is voiced by Kareen Sony from Deadpool 1 and 2.
Geeta's heart has been stolen by my cousin Bandhu. He is as dishonorable as he is attractive.
He's so new to being Spider-Man in the movie that nothing bad has happened to him yet. And apparently nothing will, because Miles saves his girlfriend's dad from dying. Like I said earlier, oh god, this sequence is so great. It's like a Bollywood movie poster brought to life. The Sanskrit sound effects have really fun translations, like this one, Tadak, which means to crackle or snap. Pavitar gives a hilarious tour where he accuses Spot of using India to go on a journey of self-discovery like every Westerner.
Is that symbolic?
That's the plot of Darjeeling Limited, which also starred Spot actor Jason Schwartzman. To stop the Super Collider, Miles uses his Venom Blast to absorb the energy, and that's when he gets a vision of a probable future event in the multiverse, his dad's death. And then he's upstaged by the best new character in the movie, Spider-Punk. I loved the animation around this dude. Just like in the comic, his look mimics like a Sex Pistols album cover. Notice this headline that says the Queen's Royal Swans are wrecking havoc again. Now in the comic, he lives in this anarcho-fascist police state ruled by Norman Osborn, and he has to liberate the people through the power of, what's it called?
Punk!
That was it. Now I should note that his real name is Hobie Brown, and in the comics, Hobie was the original Prowler. In the movie, he is voiced by Daniel Kaluuya, who you probably know as W'Kabi from Black Panther. And then Miles steps in to save Inspector Singh, disrupting what Miguel calls a canon event. Now, this is awesome and connects to the MCU in so many fun, inventive ways. This cements this movie as part of the MCU's multiverse saga. So the word canon in our nerd world means something that counts. Like the excellent new IDW Star Trek comics are considered canon. They tie in with the movies and TV shows very directly. In the comics, canon events are essentially from the main timeline of the comics. They are fundamental to a character's journey. In the movie, disrupting a canon event causes a massive, swirling black hole that threatens to engulf the universe, which Spider-Punk actually calls a metaphor for capitalism.
Wait, that swirling black goo looks familiar.
Well, it should, because this is exactly what happens in What If, when Doctor Strange disrupts an absolute point in time and destroys his universe. We saw the same effect after an incursion in Multiverse of Madness. So all of these are examples of the multiverses colliding, destroying realities, and Kang is actually out there trying to prevent this kind of thing from occurring.
I saw the multiverse, and it was dying.
We're going to talk about this in way more depth in a future video, but isn't all that really fun? This brings us to Nueva York, and this comic issue where Miguel meets Miles is drawn in the style of Spider-Man 2099's co-creator, Rick Leonardi. There are so many spider people in this part of the movie, so it's taken us a while to find them all. How we looking, buddy?
Oh, I need more time.
Okay, so we'll come back to all those spider people later in the video. I will say that the movie does put a spotlight on the Scarlet Spider voiced by Andy Samberg, and this is just wonderful. So, the Scarlet Spider is a clone of Peter Parker, and there were a few years in the 1990s where he was at the center of the clone saga. It's this like infamous storyline that sold really well at the time, but dragged on so long that it became obvious that the company was just milking it for profits instead of focusing on telling a good story.
Money, money, money.
So there was this period in the 1990s when comic companies decided to boost sales with major character-altering events, killing Superman, replacing Batman, and replacing Spider-Man with a clone of himself named Ben Reilly. This is why he is drawn with these like over-the-top muscles, and he's always brooding, both very 90s comic traits. He's also drawn in the style of comic book artist Alex Saviuk, even though the suit was designed originally by artist Tom Lyle. When Miles meets Miguel, Miguel's theme is so synth-heavy, like the score to Blade Runner. But then this very serious moment is interrupted with the return of Peter B. Parker and his new daughter, Mayday.
Mayday!
You have a baby!
I have a baby!
In one universe in the comics, May grows up to become Spider-Girl, and she is a key character in the original Spider-Verse crossover. Then, when Miguel explains canon events, he shows everybody a tree of branching timelines that looks exactly like the branching timelines that we first saw in Loki and then again in Quantumania. See, it's all connected. But then he overlays the timelines with a map that looks like a spider web and name checks the Web of Life and Destiny from the comics.
What is the Web of Life and Destiny?
So, this is a metaphysical web that connects every universe that the spider heroes are also all connected to. It's actually how their spider sense works because they're connected through this web. We see several canon events like the original Steve Ditko panel of the Spider Bite, Venom, and 3 comics with iconic moments. Spider-Man No More, replicated in Spider-Man 2, Peter lifting the wreckage like in Homecoming, and Peter's wedding to MJ. Now, as he runs through the canon events, we see the original panel of George Stacy's death. We also see shots of Captain Stacy's death from Amazing Spider-Man and from Uncle Ben's death in Spider-Man 1. And the canon event of a captain's death is called ASM 90 after the issue of Amazing Spider-Man when Captain Stacy dies. Miles realizes that his dad is about to be captain, so he'll fall prey to this captain's curse. Now, in the comics, Miles' mother is killed, but in the PS4 game, where his father is a police officer, he dies in a supervillain attack. The movie puts Miles in an impossible position, a real the needs of the many versus the needs of the few kind of conflict. Kind of like when the Green Goblin dropped the Roosevelt Island tram and Mary Jane at the same time, making Spider-Man choose who to save.
Let die the woman you love, or suffer the little children.
Now, like I said earlier, Spider-Man is defined by this choice. Does he live his life as Peter Parker or save the day as Spider-Man? Now, during the big chase scene that follows, Peter B tells Miles that he is actually the reason that he believed he could become a father because he was such a good mentor in the first movie. Now, this also ties into Miles' struggles with his father. Miles needs to believe that he is a good son and not a burden to his family. Remember, the main reason he hasn't told his family he's Spider-Man is because he's afraid that they won't love him anymore. And you know what? In the comics, when he tells his dad the truth, his dad tells him to get away from him and blames him for the death of his mother.
Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
At the end of the big chase, when Miles gets away, he leaps outward, and the camera frames this as if he is falling upward, just like in the first movie, when this symbolized his rising up to take on the role of Spider-Man. This is when he learns that he was never meant to be Spider-Man, that he's only an anomaly who can only wreak havoc on the multiverse. Every other spider person is actually part of the Web of Life and Destiny, but Miles' story has not been written, calling back to the guidance counselor's blank piece of paper. Then Miles uses the DNA sequence to send himself home, but the console here clearly says this is going to Universe 42 and not 1610, so like, I wasn't surprised at all by the twist. I was confused that there even was a twist. Did you know this was coming? Let me know in the comments below.
Yeah, I mean, his mom in Universe 42 has a different eye color.
Oh, I thought you were colorblind.
You know, that is a stereotype that people really have to stop perpetuating. I see, great. My persistence of vision is 70 frames a second, so to me, you look like a PowerPoint right now.
Super meta. So Gwen goes home to reconcile with her dad, and he takes advantage of that captain loophole by deciding to resign, sparing his own life. Spider-Punk made her a bootleg watch with spikes on it, just like the Punk bracelets.
You do not know what those are called, do you?
I'm very uncool. Now, we mentioned that Universe 42 Rio has green eyes. In fact, the entire universe has a kind of green tint. This could be a nod to The Matrix, where the scenes inside the simulation were all tinted green, a sign that things were not what they seem. Or it could simply be a nod for green being a common color for villains to wear, along with purple, the color of the Prowler suit. In this universe, his father is already dead, and his uncle Aaron stepped in to be a role model for young Miles. Now, later, when the Prowler jumps Miles on the roof, we briefly see a comics cover, Spider-Man Spider-Man claws of the Prowler. And when Aaron is holding Miles, J. Jonah Jameson on the news talks about the Sinister Six cartel. The Sinister Six are a supergroup of Spider-Man's most deadly foes. Apparently, in a universe without Spider-Man, they just flat out run crime in the city. This is when Miles puts together that he's in the wrong universe and that here there is no Spider-Man. His Uncle Aaron led Prowler Miles down the wrong path. See, in the comics, when Aaron learns that Miles has spider powers, he tries to use his nephew to become a new kingpin of crime. The Jefferson Memorial graffiti is painted over the names of Bendis and Pichelli, who were the original creators of Miles Morales. This is showing us how Miles' original story has been remade in this universe. Miles ends up being tied to a punching bag like the one that Aaron had in his apartment in the first movie, and the channel heavy spoilers caught that in the first movie, Peter is tied to a punching bag, a metaphor for how the universe always uses Spider-Man as a punching bag. This event shows Miles how dangerous he could be to the multiverse. Because he has no destiny written for him, he is capable of causing great evil and destruction. Now, I'm very excited to see exactly where this goes. Will Miles find the Peter Parker of his universe and help him get powers? Will Prowler Miles turn on his uncle and maybe help save Jefferson?
Tune in next week for the exciting conclusion.
Gwen gets the original band back together with all of our favorites from the first Spider-Verse movie, including Noir, Spider-Ham, Peter B, Penny Parker, and now with Spider-Punk and Pavitar. Doug, are we ready with all the Spider people yet?
Yep, got them all.
Here we go.
By the way, special shout out to the people who helped us out in this section, like ScreenCrush Editor-in-Chief Matt Singer, who literally wrote the book on Spider-Man and helped us find all of these, and to our old friend Paul at Heavy Spoilers, who put out a great video where he found a lot of the Spider people in the trailer, and also Srinidhi Rao for helping us do all this research. This kind of looks like the chasm suit that Ben Reilly wore when he became a supervillain. This is Mangaverse Spider-Man, and here is the Superior Spider-Man from the great run by Dan Slott, where Dr. Octopus killed Spider-Man and took over his body. Looks like he's talking to the Mark IV suit from when Peter became CEO of Parker Industries. This is Spider-Woman, the rubber suit from when Spider-Man fights Electro, and this red and gold suit was a gift from Tony Stark when he joined Tony's side in Civil War. And of course, they all do the pointing meme, just like our awesome Spider-Doug pointing shirt that you can buy in our merch store. Also, this is Bruce Banner Spider-Man from Earth 7105. Here we have the armored Spider-Man who first appeared in Web of Spider-Man 100, the Spider-Man armor Mark II from when he briefly lost his spider sense and needed more protection. And this could be the Velocity suit, maybe talking to somebody wearing the No Way Home suit. Thanks Heavy Spoilers for that observation. Here we see Spider-Girl, who plays a big part in the original Spider-Verse crossover, and this is the anti-Kingpin Spidey from Amazing Spider-Man 62. This is Spider-Lady, a steampunk version of Aunt May, and this is Spinnerette, an alternate version of Mary Jane with her daughter, Spiderling, and this one might be Ultimate Spider-Woman, who was a clone of Peter Parker. This is a werewolf Spider-Man from Earth 7085, aka the universe where everybody became wolves and ate Galactus. This is Flash Thompson as Captain Spider, and this is one of my favorites, Bagman. When the Fantastic Four helped Spider-Man lose the Venom symbiote, he needed clothes to travel home in, so Johnny Storm loaned him a spider suit with a bag to protect his secret identity. This is Spider-Man from the original and excellent PS1 game. This is Spider Armor Mark III, created to help Peter fight the Sinister Six. And this black and white Spider-Man might be from the Spider-Man comic strip, which Stan Lee actually wrote for decades. And this one looks like a female Spidey in a Santa costume. And elsewhere, we do see her with a hockey stick, so I guess she's Spider-Goon. This one is from the Spider-Man Unlimited animated series, Japanese Spider-Man on the left, and this is the suit from the PS4 game on the right. That character is voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, who also voiced him in the game. And in the wide shot, this guy is hanging one-handed like Andrew Garfield in No Way Home, and this is a medieval knight Spider-Man, and this one is your mom. Here we see future Foundation Spider-Woman from when he joined the Fantastic Four, and an old man Spider-Man who was in the Spider-Verse comics. We see Spider UK, who is a member of the multiversal Captain Britain Corps in the comics. And this is Peter Parked Car, who looks like the infamous Spider-Mobile from the comics. He is carrying Tarantula and Spider-Side, a homicidal shape-shifting clone of Spider-Man from the books. And of course, there's Web-Slinger and his horse Widow. In the chase sequence, there's a hilarious sequence that imitates the final duel of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we have Spider-Bite, Samurai Spider, beside the Julia Carpenter Spider-Woman, who Spider-Man copied his original black suit from. And then Miles gets a pep talk from the Spectacular Spider-Man, voiced by Josh Keaton like he is in the animated series. Here's Spider-Cop and of course Spider-Cat. And a T-Rex Spider-Man whose webs make a T-whip sound effect. Now during the chase, we see the original animated series Spider-Man, but his limited animation freezes him in the panel. Also, this looks like the Spider-Man from the 90s animated series. And this is Charlotte Weber, aka Sun Spider. And this is Cyborg Spider-Man, also very prominent in the Spider-Verse comics event. They run by a Spider-Man doing the stretchy web workout like Peter 2 in Spider-Man 2 and like Peter 1 in Homecoming. And then we see a Spider-Man just wearing a regular suit. Blink and you'll miss the evil doppelganger Spider-Man and a pixie-ish Spider-Mite. This one also looks like Octo-Spidey from the comics. Now, the machine that sends Miles to Universe 42 seems designed after the weaver of the Web of Life and Destiny from the Spider-Verse comic event, and notice here that little Mayday is wearing Spider-Ham pajamas. And of course, there are the villains. These images are mostly taken from the Marvel Universe Handbook published in the 1980s. We have Kraven, the original Doc Ock, with Alfred Molina saying,
"Hello, Peter,"
with Electro behind him, and Green Goblin right here. There's also Moose Terrio, who I believe is from the Spider-Ham comic books, and there's Ms. Terrio, the villain from the original Atari Spider-Man game, just a normal regular rhino, and of course Donald Glover as the Prowler. Now, this is my favorite Easter egg because it calls back to Homecoming when Glover hinted that Miles Morales could be living in the MCU.
I don't want those weapons in this neighborhood. I got a nephew who live here.
Now, Glover is actually responsible for the creation of Miles Morales. When he wore these pajamas in the show Community, it sparked a fan petition to cast him as a new Spider-Man in the Amazing Spider-Man reboot. So, in return, Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pichelli created Miles Morales. This further connects this movie to the MCU's Multiverse Saga, and we are going to talk about that in a future video, so keep it subscribed to ScreenCrush so you don't miss out. And thanks again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. Just a reminder to scan the QR code on the screen and use the code ScreenCrush for $5 off your variety pack, or go to magicspoon.com/ScreenCrush today to try out the limited edition flavors, oatmeal cookie and chocolate chip cookie. But let us know what you think of all this down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.